Hello, everybody. How are you doing? As you can see, still my new setting until I don't get to solve my Wi Fi issues. And yeah, welcome, everybody. We are here for three more chapters of my fanfiction trilogy about Harry. And yeah, like usual, hello, Irene. Like usual, I'll do my disclaimer. So, the characters in this piece of work are not mine. I didn't invent them. They are covered by a copyright, which is not mine. And I don't make money out of it whatsoever. So, yeah, I still register it as mine, but there is a copyright on it. So, and that being said, I guess we can just have a bit of refreshing of what happened up to now. So yeah, we found out how Harry and Ginny are doing. Fine. How Ron and Hermione are doing. Not fine at all. So they are arguing. Ron is full of frustration because he doesn't like his life at all. He gives everything for granted and is always dissatisfied about everything. And yeah, and we found out as well that Harry and Hermione, when they were in the 10th, in the 7th book, they actually had some intercourses. Ron found it out, got mad, and he just threatened Harry not to show up in his family anymore. He doesn't want to see him again. So Harry and Ginny are trying to solve the situation, but it seems unsolvable, and they were going to decide what to do on Christmas because everything is happening around Christmas times. So all the children are back to Hogwarts and they wanted to celebrate all together at Shell Cottage. So they're very undecided on what to do. Shall we go? Shan't we go? Shall we go? Shan't we go? Yes, let's go. So yeah, we left them here. They decided to go. And now we will start with chapter 13. And I remind everybody that you can download this chapter on my website, which is www.scribblingaloud.wordpress.com. And yeah, I usually upload them the day after, more or less. So let's drink a sip of water. Let's hope my cat is gonna stay out. And I guess we can start. So, chapter 13. I won't fight with you. The sun was shining up in the sky. Snow had fallen abundantly, and they found themselves ankle deep in it when they apparated. The sea was smooth and sparkling, and a seagull was flying on it far away. It was a very beautiful and peaceful spot. Harry thought that he would have liked, once the kids would have grown and moved out, to come to live in a place like that. The children started to run uphill toward the house, throwing snowballs against each other, their loud cheering covering the gentle rumble of the sea and the squealing of the birds. Harry and Ginny followed behind, both wondering uneasily what was expecting them. They reached the top, and everybody was already there. Albus, James, and Lily had already joined the other children. They could see a knot of people talking animatedly close to the shelter. It was evident, though, that it wasn't a pleasant Christmassy chat, and as soon as they started to look around for any sign of Ron, Fleur reached them. Seeing the kids coming, she had run to them before they could approach the house. Her hair was all disheveled by the wind, and her face greatly agitated. She spoke so fast, the words were all jumbled up. Her accent never disappeared, heightened. Harry, you must go away, right now. Ron is here and... She didn't get to finish the sentence. They perceived him detaching from the rest. Molly tried to hold him, but he shook her off brusquely. Tension was stamped on everybody's face. Harry and Ginny realized straight away they made a mistake in coming, in seeing Ron approaching. He marched steadfast, with his wand clutched menacingly and the thunderous expression. Halting several feet from Harry, he bellowed, looking ominously in Harry's eyes. I told you quite clearly, I don't want to see you around my family anymore. This is my family too, Harry told him back without flinching, sustaining the stare. It is not. It has never been. You always try to steal it from me, but I won't allow it any longer. You are raving, Harry answered, trying to understand Ron's intention. They were still in time to back away if he just would allow them to. However, he could feel that stepping back now would have only incensed Ron. He wanted to avoid at all costs a scene in front of the kids, so he kept his ground on the lookout for any opening that would allow him to extricate himself without a row. We are settling today, once and for all, Ron said, pointing the wand against Harry. No Protego spell. We duel now. He could see people paralyzed around them, unsure on how to behave. The children were grouped together with scared faces. He felt Ginny 2 steps behind him and whispered to her, Get back. Do not intervene. I have to deal with this alone. Ginny's eyes darted from him to Ron with apprehension, but she did as she was told, and she backed away slowly. Harry took his wand from his pocket and, keeping it at arm's length so that it was very visible to Ron, let it drop in the snow beside him. I won't fight with you, he stated. Ron became scarlet with rage. Yes, you are! You pick up that wand and you face me! I won't, Harry responded resolutely. He knew that fighting Ron would just make things worse. He was sure he would have beaten him. He was fitter and overall more skilled with magic. He had spent the last 15 years fighting against dark magic, while Ron was working in a shop. There was no way in which Ron could prevail on him. And he knew as well that if he had defeated him here in front of his family, everything would have been lost forever. The humiliation would have been too great. You can use the Cruciatus curse on me if it'll make you feel better. I deserve it. I promise I won't budge. And if you are so enraged you want to use the Avada, well, I've already bought 19 years of life I didn't expect to have. I'm not afraid. It was a bold step, and certainly he didn't want to die. But he was sure that Ron wouldn't have struck him defenseless, and his rage would have evaporated fast. For a moment, he thought he had been right. He saw Ron's wand waver, and his expression alter from anger to indecision. But then the anger returned, and with a swift move, he steadied his arm. I'm sorry. But then the anger returned, and with a swift move, he steadied his arm, and without speaking, he made a green light sprouting from his wand. Everything happened very quickly. Lily started to run, probably to try to stop Ron, or to get to Harry, or just wanting to stand between them. He wasn't sure which one. Harry understood that Ron's spell wasn't destined to hit him. He aimed too low. Surely he only wanted to scare him without real intention of hurting anybody. But being a non-verbal spell, Lily didn't realize what was happening, and she was in the middle of them, suddenly, at the wrong moment. He saw it in slow motion. The green light hit her square in the head, and he saw her falling like a doll. A pink dot keel over the ground. He was petrified. No, he whispered, but he was incapable of any movement. His mind was ordering him to run there, but his body wouldn't respond, immobilized by shock. He heard Ginny screaming, and that finally unblocked him. No! He shouted now, and he darted to Lily's body lying in the snow. He took her in his arms. He caressed her, he shook her, but she didn't move. Her eyes were closed. He felt panic rising. He didn't know what to think, he didn't know what to do. He tried to call her, but his voice was trembling. He was trembling. And the dreadful possibility made his way snake-like in his mind. What if? No, he can't be. Ginny got to them and took her from him. Harry was in mind-blocking shock, but with the corner of his eye, he spotted Ron. Which spell did you use? He sprang to his feet, and in a second he was upon him. Ron, speechless, was looking at Lily. His freckles were more visible than ever on his white face. Harry took him by the collar and shouted, "Which spell did you use?" He didn't seem to hear him, his glance fixed on Lily in Ginny's arms. Harry yanked him violently. "Which spell did you use?" He shouted even louder, fighting the impulse of hitting him. He startled, as if realizing only at that moment that Harry was there, and stammered, It wasn't Avada." While this was going on between them, around was chaos. Many were screaming or running toward them. Ted got there first, and glimpsing him, Harry let go of Ron and dropped again on the ground close to them. For sure, Ted could help. He was just in training, but surely he could help. Ted ordered to call for a healer, and he saw Arthur and Bill at the same time take their wands and produce a patronum that darted away. Ted asked Ginny to put Lily back on the ground. Lily's dark hair made a crown around her head, and in the snow looked strikingly like blood. Her face was pale, and her eyes were still closed. Ginny was panic-stricken. She was trembling violently, looking at Ted in desperation and hope. She couldn't even speak. Ted got his wand, ignited it, and opening Lily's eyelids, moved it in front of them. He then took her wrist and put his fingers on it, waiting for the pulse. Those were the longest seconds in Harry's life. In his head was just pounding the same phrase over and over and over again. Please don't let her be dead. Please don't let her be dead. Please don't let her be dead. Ted's answer never came. He rested gently Lily's arm against her body, and after a moment, he looked at Harry. Quite simply, without speaking, his expression blank. He just stared at Harry with those penetrating eyes of a shade of blue so light they were almost white. And Harry knew. He felt dazed, confused. Like from very far away, he heard Ginny emitting a sound he never heard before from her or anybody else. It was a long howl of pain and desperation coming from deep inside. She started to sob violently, folding on herself, her hair falling like a curtain around her head and brushing Lily's chest. Molly dropped on her side and hugged her, ash face. He saw Arthur trying to take the reluctant children away, and all the others were around them aghast. Ron was still where he left him, gazing from Lily to his hands, his eyes wet and horror-struck. And it happened then. The sight of Ron unlocked in him a fury like he never felt before, cold and violent. It swallowed Harry completely. He couldn't see anything that was standing in front of his eyes. He just felt this feeling getting hold of him completely. He was disempowering his reason and enhancing his instinct. And his instinct, that was stronger than anything else, wanted to see Ron dead. He didn't have his wand with him, but even if he did, he wouldn't have used it. He wanted to kill him with his bare hands. He stood up in a flash, seized Ron's shoulders, and before he could realize that Harry was on him, he gathered all his strength and socked him hard right on the face. He heard a crack. Something had broken. It could have been his hand or Ron's nose. He didn't know which, and neither he cared. Blood sprouted from Ron's face on Harry's feet. Without letting him go, he kneed him in the stomach. More blood from Ron's mouth to his coat. and when he was on the floor, he started to kick him with all the strength he could muster. This intense, bloody red was the only color Harry was able to see. On his fist, on Ron's face, now unrecognizable, and on the snow around them. It incensed him even more. Ron wasn't opposing any resistance. Perhaps he had lost consciousness. It was difficult to say. In any case, he didn't calm Harry at all. When Hermione realized what was going on, she screamed in alarm, and two people, he didn't know who, took him by the shoulders, trying to pull him away from Ron. The anger he felt gave him an energy he normally didn't possess. He struggled to free himself, and he knew that they were no match for him. He could overcome them easily. They felt it too. So one of them, that turned out to be Bill, shouted, "George, do something!" And from far away, Harry perceived George pointing his wand toward him. "Stupefy!" he heard, and everything went blank. And this was the end of chapter 13. Hello, Nectar. Hello, Marco. Don't worry, Nectar. Totally fine. You already heard this one in Italian, so I guess it's fine. You just needed to hear the first one and you didn't hear. Just gonna grab a pen a second. Here we are. So, sorry about that. I'm sorry about the mispronunciation of some words. I prepared them in advance, but I have time to forget how to pronounce them when I read. So, yeah, we had this kind of, very sad. You are as shocked as Harry. I know. I was shocked too when I wrote it. You cannot imagine when I found out that this was going to happen, how shocked I was. Oh, thank you, Nectar. Yeah, I know. It's shocking, isn't it? And yeah, it has been kind of tough to write because I got fond of Lily. And honestly, when I started to write, I didn't know this was going to happen. And when I found out, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to write this. But I couldn't avoid it. So yeah, it's a quite sad developing of event because everybody's life from now on, it won't be the same. And it's gonna be tough for Harry. Ginny is gonna be tough for Ron that killed her by mistake. So yeah, a very intense turn of event. I grabbed the pen because sometimes I find a mistake. If I don't correct them straight away, then I forget where they are. So yeah, well, I'll find it later. And yeah, I guess we can carry on and see how it develops. So, chapter 14. Think about something soothing. He regained his consciousness on the bed of the spare room. Bill and George were standing around it. Their faces were strained. They still had their wands in their hand, meaning that they were ready to stun him again if they had to. It was an unneeded precaution, however. The violence had subsided. He felt just anger pounding at the bottom of him like a heartbeat. It was there, ready to spring out again, but for the moment, it quietened. "I'm sorry, Harry. You were going to kill him. We had to do something," George told him with a sorrowful expression. "Where is he?" He asked only to make sure he wasn't in the house. He didn't think he could answer of himself in case of a meeting. "He is at San Mango's. You managed to do quite a bit of damage before we could intervene." He wasn't speaking with resentment, just with a matter-of-fact tone. "Somebody from the ministry is there. He will need to answer a few questions when he will be able to. There is going to be an investigation. It seems like he may have to go to Azkaban for a while. Hermione is there, trying to see what she can do. Harry didn't say anything. To him, it was all well deserved, and he was just sorry the mentors were not guarding the place anymore. He wanted him to be as miserable as possible there. How do you feel? Bill asked. He turned slowly to look at him. His expression hardened, and the pounding inside him grew steadily. What do you think? And under his gaze, Bill lowered his on the floor. He left the room. He needed to get out, to get some air, and be alone. He felt this mix of confused feeling rising: anger, panic, pain, threatening to burst out any moment, and he didn't know what to do to control them. Going toward the door, he heard a voice he didn't recognize, coming from the living room. Probably it was just a stunning spell, but cast with such violence on the head of a 6-year-old child. He looked in there, and the shock was as strong as a blow. He felt all the air leaving his lungs, as if somebody slapped him hard on the face. On the sofa, there was Lily's body, limp and lifeless. He wasn't prepared. He didn't want to have to see this. It was too much. He felt in him a sickness building up very fast, together with an anger so powerful it was uncontrollable. He was standing between him and everything else, and against everything and everybody. The pounding grew so much to make him deaf to all that was around him. Ginny was still crying, and Molly was holding her while speaking with who he now knew was the healer. Ted was there too, the force realizing he was there. He didn't try to approach him or to speak to him. He just looked at him, and from that look, Harry understood that probably he alone knew what was happening inside him. Then Ginny saw him too. Her face was full of pain and affliction. It was torture to Harry to see that face. He didn't soften him, it just made him even angrier. He hastened out of the house, in the need to be out immediately. With the corner of his eyes, he saw Ginny about to follow him, but Ted got hold of her and shook his head. He felt thankful for it. He didn't want to confront Ginny and talk about it, not knowing what his reaction could be. He didn't trust himself. As soon as he was at the back of the house, he threw up violently in the snow. He felt all those fierce feelings going out from him through the sickness, emptying his body and his mind completely until when only a bleak numbness was left. He stood immobile, kneeling in the snow for a while. When he succeeded in standing up, he leaned against the wall, looking in the garden. Nobody was around. Probably everybody was to tend to the business death always calls to. The trees were barren and grey. In front of him was the place where many years before he interred Dobby. Everything was happening again. Why was he doomed to see so many people he loved to die around him? How many had he witnessed going before their time? He always thought that after Voldemort, he wouldn't have to be all this again. He felt safe, and for that reason, unprepared. Why did life have to be so unfair to him? Didn't he deserve to be happy now? Why, my Lily? He could hear her voice just a few hours before saying, "If that won't go, I won't go." Thinking about her made him harden. He felt something closing down in him. He had to protect himself somehow. He didn't want to suffer like this anymore. He must shut it, otherwise he would become mad with grief. And Lily again. "We can be each other's birthday present." "This is hell. I have to stop this. What can I do?" "Think about something soothing." "Yes, but what? What?" He recalled when at 17, after Voldemort tried to kill him again, he met Dumbledore in the white space. In the white space, he thought He had died then, and it was so nice, so peaceful. How lovely it would be to go there again, be in peace. It meant death, though. Do I want to die? It would have been a relief in a way. Life, from now on, would have been hellish. This was not something he could forget sooner or later. It would have been there, accompanying him like a cancer, forever. There was no escape. Death is an escape, and a sweet one as that. He pondered about it seriously for some moments, but then he thought about Ginny and the boys, and he knew it wasn't an option. He couldn't do this to Ginny. I must stay here and bear it. He didn't move from that wall until evening. The wintry darkness, with its frost, dawned around him. He was immune to everything, however. He didn't feel neither cold, nor hungry, nor thirsty. Weariness, maybe. He longed for some sleep. He longed for the oblivion sleep could give him. But he didn't want to meet anybody. No yet. After some time, Ted appeared. The moon was up in the sky, and he could see his contour quite easily. Of all the people, he was the least unwelcome. He knew he wouldn't have pestered him with silly questions, tears, or requests. I've just come to tell you that Ginny and Molly are going to the Barrow. The funeral will be in the cemetery on the town at 10 o'clock. We thought it was better than in London. You can go there now or tomorrow, as you prefer. Bill said that she doesn't mind if you want to stay for the night. His tone was flat and devoid of emotions. Harry knew he was probably grieving too. He loved Lily dearly. But he exerted himself in not showing it. He knew it wasn't the right move with him. Where? He couldn't bring himself to pronounce Lily's name. And anyway, Lily was no more. It was just her body, and it didn't matter where it was. He just didn't want to see it again. Ted understood the unfinished question. She's at St. Mango's. They will keep her until tomorrow. It seemed best. I will go to the Barrow later. They don't need to wait for me. He planned to go there when everybody was sleeping. He didn't want to see any of them. Reading his thought, Ted said. I told them to leave you alone, but you will have to speak to them eventually, especially to Ginny. Don't let these bad feelings take over you, he tailed as he returned back to the house. Too late. Harry got to the Barrow a few hours later. Everything was quiet. A note left on the door informed him that a camp bed in Ginny's old room was made for him, and a change of clothes was in the living room if he wanted to have a shower. Some food was in the kitchen if he was hungry. He would take a shower. A hot shower would have been nice. He felt suddenly shivering and cold in the warmth of the house. It couldn't therefore come from the frosty night outside. It must have been something from the inside. As he was undressing, he noticed his hand still covered with Ron's blood, now dried. He observed it a few moments, mildly interested. It was strange to remember the violence overtaking him just hours before. He felt nothing now. Just nothing. Perhaps the starry night had calmed him somehow. He was in a kind of odd trance. He would do the things he had to do, but not thinking too much beyond it. Take a shower, change your clothes, brush your teeth, and that's it. He didn't need to think about anything else to keep going. He didn't touch the food left for him. Only the thought made him feel sick. He would just go to bed. He felt so tired. He was looking forward so much to the blissful nothing that was waiting for him. The room was dark and silent. Ginny was sleeping, and Harry was thankful for it. He realized when he got in bed that this was going to be the hard part. When lying without doing anything, one's thoughts start to wander, and they cannot be stopped. Hardly one can direct them. Now, it was going to be difficult not to think about Lily. Keep your mind clear, he ordered himself. If you fall asleep quickly, it will be a sweet nothing for a few hours. It was very difficult, however, not to think about the morrow. The funeral was waiting for him, threatening to wake the pounding in him again. He would control it. He would be strong and he would sleep. He had just to think about something soothing again. Think about the white place, he told himself. And with that serene memory, he managed to sleep in a dreamless sleep. And that was the end of chapter 14. So yeah, we left them a bit heartbroken and confused, poor dear. And I guess we can carry on with the last chapter of the evening, which is chapter 15. Bye, Nectar. See you next week, I hope. And yeah, I guess we can carry on. Chapter 15. Don't touch me. When he woke up in the morning, for a fraction of a second, Irene, Ron was the black sheep of the family already. Yeah. Yeah, but poor him anyway. So what are you saying is better to him than anybody else? He was already stained anyway. Yeah, maybe you're right, but that doesn't make it easier for him, the poor guy. I always felt sorry for him. I already said that before. Many people actually hate him, but I always kind of find him like funny and sweet, and I was always kind of fond of the guy, despite everybody hate him. I think that he's spineless, which he is, by the way. So, when he woke up in the morning, for a fraction of a second, he was sure to be in his bed in London. But he wasn't, and the awareness of it came too soon. He wished with all his soul it could be possible to sleep forever, never to wake up. The day before appeared in his mind with brutality. Lily was dead, and there was nothing he or anybody could do about it. Feeling himself too close to the border that separated himself from a pit of desperation, he started to repeat to himself like a mantra, "Do not think, do not think, do not think." And keeping it going in his mind, he started to dress. Some of his clothes had appeared out of nothing on his bed. Somebody must have been to his place to get them. They were formal Muggle clothing, a white shirt, black trousers, and black jacket. He didn't wear the tie. He hated to feel his neck constricted in what looked like a noose. Ginny wasn't there. Her bed was unmade. Again, he was relieved. He didn't know what she could have told her, and he wasn't ready for her tears that would remind him why they were there and not in London at home. The light coming from the window told him that it was probably almost time to go. He was glad his mantra was working. He just felt very weary, but nothing more. Molly was serving breakfast to Albus, James, and Ginny, her expression somber. When she saw Harry, she addressed him with a sad smile. "Good morning, Harry. Sit down, so you can have breakfast." "No, Molly, I'm not hungry. I will wait outside until it is time to go," he replied. Ginny didn't look at him. She was lost in her grief, a toast in her hand she wouldn't take to her mouth. In front of her, James looked at Harry for a moment, and then quickly averted his eyes. He read in them something he had never seen there before while looking at him. Fear. He wasn't too surprised by it. He had just seen his dad, who never and ever laid hand on them, beating a friend almost to death, his uncle. No wonder he was a bit unsettled. He was probably discovering a whole new dad he didn't know the existence of. Albus, on the other side, had eyes only for Ginny. He was looking at her with a pitiful expression of longing, heartbroken to witness. His food lay untouched on his plate. There weren't any tears from them, and Harry couldn't imagine what was passing in their head. It seemed they hadn't realized what happened yet. A quivering voice in his mind interrupted his mantra to remind him of his role as a father. He should have talked to them, comfort them. But how could he do that without admitting Lily's death? It was impossible. He had to focus on not thinking. He had to detach from anything that would take away his mind from it. Therefore, before he could start to feel pity for the scene, he made for the outside. It was another gorgeous sunny day that didn't represent the hurricane that was devastating his family. A bird was chirping unconcerned with Lily's death, and the chickens were pecking the ground without a worry in the world. He sat on a fence, looking without seeing, his mind blank, waiting. When they got to the cemetery, there was a small crowd. It was a wonder how, in the space of a day, all these people could have been informed. Luna was there, and Dean and Seamus with their families. It was a long time since he'd seen them. Hermione was there with the kids, all his colleagues, and all the Chudley Cannons team. Minerva McGonagall, Neville, and many people he didn't recognize. The cemetery keeper had been confounded, evidently. He didn't happen that often to see such a crowd in a small cemetery of the countryside. Harry felt indifferent. He just hoped nobody would try to speak to him. He didn't want to acknowledge a single person. They gathered around the hole in the hearth. The coffin, so small, was suspended on it. It was a pang that threatened to destroy all the work he was doing not to face reality. He looked in front of him, without focusing on anything. He took a big breath and started the mantra again. Do not think, do not think, do not think. But it was getting so difficult with the small coffin in front of him. Ginny's brothers made a semicircle around them like guardian angels. Charlie was there too. He realized it now. Molly was keeping Ginny in her arms. Both faces were covered with tears. The boys were looking at the grave with a hollow expression. Albus was clenching convulsively the end of Ginny's coat, and James was standing behind, on Bill's side, looking for the fatherly sustain that Harry was incapable of providing. Then, his wandering eyes fell on a small photo posed on the coffin. He didn't know who chose it, but he remembered that picture. It was him who took it. They were in the park last summer. They brought a kite with them. It had been Harry's idea, and the kids were all eager to try this unusual muggle toy. He had explained to Lily how to work it. She had started to run with the kite in her hand, and when it took flight, she looked at him, radiant with joy at her success, and he took the picture at that moment. She was moving, laughing, looking at him, her red hair full of sun moving against the wind. That was too much. He couldn't pretend not to see what was in front of him any longer. He remembered her only 2 days before, with her face and hands whitened by flour while making biscuits with Ginny. She was laughing then too. And he suddenly realized at that precise moment that never more he would hear her laugh. Never more he could hug her. He would never hear the voice that would soothe him when he was troubled. She would never grow up to go to Hogwarts or become a woman. All her wishes and childish dreams would never be realized. And never, any more, he would see her Lily again. The monstrosity of the word never, that erected an insurmountable barrier in front of everything that was so dear to him, took possession of his mind. He felt like he was drawing in it. Somebody had started to speak, saying something about tragedy, but he couldn't hear or see properly, obfuscated by his own nerve wracking reflection. His heart was pounding like mad in his chest. I need to get away from here, he thought. He couldn't endure to hear empty words about tragedy. He wasn't ready to have to listen to all the people that afterward would have wanted to shake hands or say how sorry they were. They couldn't even imagine what was happening to him now. What would you do with condolences? He had to get away right then. He could feel his anger mounting at the injustice of this. He was powerless. There was absolutely nothing he could do to change the situation, and this incensed him still more. It was madness coming upon him. He felt like shouting, destroying things. I must get away. He had always known all his life to be hot tempered. That created him problems in the past. For that reason, growing, he had worked on it, finally managing to keep his anger down, not to let it run away with him. He would always try not to get upset because he knew how his hot temper was blinding and overwhelming once awakened. He would always try to avoid arguments, and he was letting go of many things he didn't like because he didn't want that to happen. But now, it seemed he lost the ability. It didn't work anymore. He couldn't stop this feeling taking over. He tried to command himself. While the man was still saying nonsense about life and death, he leaned toward Ginny, and between his teeth, he said, I must leave. Now. She turned at him in surprise. Her face was streaked with tears. Harry saw her mouth forming a no, but the verge of speaking it, she looked in his eyes, stopped in her track, and nodded slowly. He wasn't sure what she saw in them, and he would have gone anyway, no matter what she said. He wasn't asking her, only informing, and even that costed him much. He turned around and quickly passed between the crowd that opened up for him. People were following him with their gaze, probably taken aback, but nobody tried to stop him. They saw in his face that he was unwise. In a second, he was on the street, and without knowledge of what he was doing, without pausing to check if Muggle were passing by, he thought about home and disapparated. A moment later, he was in front of the door, and almost put it down in his haste to get inside. As if in there could be something that could placate the rage he felt. There was nothing that could help him there, but everything to make it worse. Pictures staring from the walls, Lily's toy lying around, her room. He walked to the bathroom to escape all of it and opened the sink tub. He splashed his face with icy cold water and paused there with his hands on it, listening to the mad pounding of his rage. And then he slowly raised his eyes to the mirror. He saw his face, his expression heinous. He saw his eyes. There was only hatred in them. He couldn't keep it in any longer. With a cold fury, he grasped something that was on the sink and smashed the mirror. Blood started to gush from cuts on his hand. He didn't feel the pain. He went to the kitchen, unsure of what he would do. He was there, pounding stronger and stronger. He had to let it out at all cost. As soon as he appeared in it, he heard a voice coming from Aunt Mariel's portrait. How was the... He didn't let her finish. He didn't want to hear what was probably going to be a question about the funeral. That petulant voice set him off. It unleashed all the vicious energy he was trying to suppress. He threw the first thing he could lay hand on against the portrait that fell on the floor with a thud. And then he was havoc. He lost control completely over himself. He didn't know what he was doing. He only knew that the fury that got hold of him the day before when beating Ron was back, ferocious and savage. He took it out on anything was passing under his hands or feet. He smashed, crushed, and wrecked whatever he could grasp. He was destruction. He was hurting himself. He was slightly aware of it. Some fingers had fractured, but the fierceness in him was so strong he didn't leave space for any other sensation. But that was exactly what he wanted. He longed to feel physical pain that could distract him from the mental one. He grabbed a piece of broken glass from the floor and, ripping the shirt sleeve, slashed his skin with it several times. But he wasn't helping. He could barely feel it. Like an animal in a cage, he walked up and down. His head was in his hands, and a roar erupted from it. It was like going crazy. There was no escape. Then, still keeping his head in his hands, he sat in a corner. The anger was there, edging everything, ready to strike again. He didn't dare to move. He was a spring ready to dart. He didn't dare to move, not to trigger himself. It was impossible to know how long had passed. It could have been minutes or hours. He just knew that after a while, the door's lock clicked, and Ginny and the boys were in the house. He couldn't see them, but knew exactly what was happening. A sudden gasp. It was Ginny as she saw him. Instinctively, she tried to stop the boys from coming forward to hide the sight from them. But it was too late. They stood transfixed in front of the kitchen, taking in the devastation, and he, wrecked and battered, was sitting in the middle of it. He heard Ginny tell the boys to go to their room. She then walked slowly toward him. "Harry," she said tentatively. But she didn't have to touch him. He could feel the anger pounding. He didn't know what would have happened if she had touched him. Something unpleasant. He was sure of it. He had to warn her. He had to fight the monster raging in him to caution her. He tried to speak, but just a low and aggressive growl came out from his mouth. Ginny recoiled frightened. "Don't touch me!" he snarled. He had to protect his family from himself. He stood up in haste and ran from the house. And that was the end of chapter 15. So let me see what you wrote. Now I'm at Bulgaria, I didn't deserve it. Next time I need it. Today is Friday and Saturday. I have the commitment tomorrow. But it's fine. But to answer to Irene, he didn't deserve it. Yeah, I know he didn't deserve it, but he kind of bring it on himself, doesn't he? I mean, even in his youth, he kind of always felt this frustration and this unsatisfaction for his life. I mean, he was always complaining about things, and it was always feeling as if as if he was less than anybody else. Everybody else was more important, was more cool, and everything. And I guess then growing up, all this frustration grew and grew and grew, and at one point it had to explode, and it exploded in this way. So yeah, he didn't deserve it, I agree, but at the same time, I mean, maybe not exactly this situation, but something like that had to happen sooner or later. It couldn't just keep going as this perfect friendship forever, because Ron just felt too, how can I say, shadowed by Harry. So, yeah, a collapsing situation was bound to happen, I guess. And yeah, now we have Harry in this very scary mood. Yeah, that's true. That's the HP fan. I'm sorry, that friendship. might be over. Yeah, no. Yeah, it's always sad when you have to confront reality. But I guess, yeah, it could keep on as a fairy tale, and we could certainly keep on believing that Hermione and Ron would be happy forever together, and keep believing that Harry and Ron would be friends forever. But if we look at things in a logical way, that couldn't happen. I mean, just, I'm sorry, but I believe, maybe I'm wrong, but this is what I believe. I mean, when I finished the seventh book, I was like, okay, Harry and Ron, sooner or later they're gonna to argue, and something bad will happen. And Hermione and Ron, come on, it cannot work. It just cannot work. It's so blatant that it cannot work. But yeah, and yeah, the situation is starting to be really bad. And the next week, I guess we are gonna have the most intense chapters, and yeah, there is gonna be a very tough chapter, a very tough chapter. And if Rowling, yeah, true, if Rowling should happen to hear this particular thing, I think she might decide to sue me. So let's hope she will never find it out. But yeah, to return back to the sad reality of things, I guess the need to write down this trilogy came out exactly from that thing, because when you read it as a child or as a teenager, you don't really realize all this conflict. But when you read it as an adult, you start to see things in a different way. And that happened to me when I finished the seventh. I was just like, okay, this is all nice and pleasant, but the last chapter, with all this sweetness and coziness and everybody happy and like this perfect family, it just didn't suit. I mean, it just, I was very, I don't want to say disappointed, but I was like, come on, it cannot be that happy. It just cannot be. And so, yeah, from that thing, all these books are born. It was just, yeah. So I guess this is everything for tonight. And the next week is gonna be on Thursday, as usual. I usually always read on Thursday. So I hope you will be here. And yeah, as I said, you will find the chapters on my website. Irene, basically, welcome to the adult world. Yeah, that's so true, actually. That's so true. Welcome to the adult world. There is no an happy ending, and many bad things happens, and we need to accept them, and we cannot keep on living in a fairy tale. Wake up. So yeah, so next Thursday, and you will find the chapters. I apologize again for my many mistakes in pronunciation. I'm still working on it every single day. So yeah, hopefully by the end of the trilogy, I'll be very fluent with a perfect accent. Who knows? And yeah, so I guess this is a good night. I hope you enjoyed it. So yeah, see you next week. Goodbye.